Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Shortlist Showcase as part of the 2020 Queensland Architecture Awards. My name's Julie Beveridge, and I'm National Manager of CPD Coordination and Delivery at the Institute. It's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon as we get the inside scoop on the shortlisted projects in the Elina Mottram Award for Residential Architecture, houses, alterations and additions. Today, we're going to be hearing from Michael Leinberg from Leinberg Wang, whose project has also been shortlisted for House of the Year. Paul Worrell and Linton Godden from Red Dog Architects, and Morgan Jenkins from Nielsen Jenkins. There's one shortlisted project that wasn't to be presented today, and I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the success of Matthew Eagle from ME and his project, Cantala House, which also took out the gong for Regional House of the Year in the Gold Coast Northern Rivers region. So first up, we have Michael Leinberg, who will walk us through Leinberg Wang's shortlisted project, Park Road House. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Jules. I'll just walk you through some of the ideas behind our Park Road House, which is situated in Yurongpilly, south of Brisbane CBD. So our clients for this project, Jenny and Tim, are semi-retired, and they're very social people, and part of the project, their brief was really about, they have two kids that have moved out of home, but they really want this house, this home of 33 years, to be a place that can encourage their kids and future grandkids to come back home and occupy. So in a way, we had to think about this house as being multi-generational at times. So the existing home is a two-storey Queenslander located on a corner block with the formal entry from Park Road and the secondary entry from Wattle Avenue. The existing site is 2,200 square metres, and it has a 20-metre long swimming pool to the north, a full-size tennis court to the east, and a deck as well to the east. So it's certainly a house that had a lot of program, but we found that there were two main concerns or problems with the house. The first was, that the public rooms of the house were all disconnected from one another. So here's an image of the existing formal lounge room, which is quite a beautiful room with ornate ceilings and heritage archways, but it was disconnected from the kitchen and dining areas of the home due to the fat plan arrangement of a central core with this bedroom, which disconnected this room from the other public rooms of the house. Then the other obstacle we found was that the house itself was very disconnected from its immediate site context. So the relationship of the enclosed sleep out spaces didn't talk to the existing adjacent pool that faced north, or the tennis court, or even the deck itself. So to talk about the first issue, we strip away these ancillary structures around the core of the house, and then we can focus on the actual core of the home. So it's as explained, a pyramid style Queenslander with a central corridor and this 4-room core, which is 3 bedrooms and a formal sitting room. So the first strategy here was to remove this central bedroom and then open up the north and eastern side of the existing sleep outs. This then enables the public rooms of the house to talk to one another and links this formal room through to the northern aspect of connecting the outdoor pool area through to the formal room of the home. The next strategy was then how do we capture the immediate outdoor pool area and associated landscape and drag that hard up against the existing house. So we do this by setting up a grid-like net structure that we cast out over the pool area. And this grid net structure the proportions are based off the existing Queenslander proportions. So based off the existing width of the Queenslander, and also the net structure is based off the width of the existing veranda proportions. So by casting that out over the pool enclosure and then out over the broader site itself, starts to help us set up a new circulation diagram for not only the house, but the broader site issues. So this is a diagram here that shows how we can set up a secondary entry sequence. So a view of the downstairs plan, and by throwing this net out over the site, we can then formalize a secondary entry with these off-form concrete planter boxes that alternate in height. And the hatched areas show the accompanying landscape that come with these planter boxes. So this allows people to enter off Wattle Avenue and actually occupy the undercroft of this house independent of the upstairs living quarters. We then, this also allows us to set up a circulation spine along the north of the house so that you can circumnavigate the existing home. And then finally captures the existing pool and accompanying garden. So this diagram here helps explain the way that you can then circumnavigate the existing home. So the formal entry off Park Road up into the front veranda, and then the secondary entry down here off Wattle Avenue along these alternating concrete planter boxes. You can then circulate up this entry spine and also from Park Road come through along this circulation spine and down into the backyard. And that's the existing plan type. So here's a view of the existing formal entry room. And then when we remove that central bedroom, that starts to link this space to the north. And as captured here by CFJ, that formal room is linked across to the new kitchen and to the outside pool area to the north. The new works, the insertions, the joinery insertions are inserted into the existing building, careful not to collide. And then our contemporary version of the heritage archways. So this is a view of the existing northern condition, showing the existing sleep out relationship to the pool area. And by inserting this circulation spine along the north and setting up the kitchen along the northern edge within the existing sleep out, by the circulation spine being one step down from the existing sleep out, and by lifting the ground levels of the pool area slightly, we can set up a relationship between inside and out that doesn't require a balustrade. And then this explains how that net structure can drag that landscape hard up against the existing house. And that's the current condition with the landscape growth. and a shot of the edge condition. The existing pool, and then when we throw this net out over the pool area, and then the associated landscape. This is a photo of the existing deck condition. You can see that they're people that love to live outdoors, but the relationship between the existing house and the deck is quite closed down, which means that the deck is rather demanding. They're using it as a TV room, and they've got a fridge out there, and they've brought their interior furniture and couches outside to make the most of living on the deck. So our strategy instead was, how do we set up a condition between inside and out where they can actually use the interior sleep out spaces. So these panels slide back and you can store a TV in behind there. But then we're setting up a condition where by taking this bite out of the deck, you then can deliver light deep downstairs, but also have an edge condition where the inside, the interior of the house feels outdoors, taking the stress off the way that the deck has to perform. And the relationship between the deck and these raised planter boxes. And the way that the garden is brought up to the upper level of the house with these raised planter boxes. And a view from the deck looking down to this secondary entry sequence. So this starts to show that the existing condition, relationship between the existing house and the backyard, and the way that this undercroft really has no relationship to the backyard. But by formalizing this secondary entry sequence, that we can then set up these outdoor spaces in between these raised planter boxes as places to occupy for people staying downstairs, and create a stronger relationship between the house and the backyard. And this is that secondary entry sequence. And some shots to show how the landscape is coming along. And this shot is a shot that shows the existing pool condition and the way that it really took over the yard. So instead, by throwing that net out over the site and capturing that pool, we can then set up a new language for the pool fence. And the pool fence actually becomes the new language for the project itself, and gives back the lawn to the front of the house. And this is a view from the street showing the proposed works. That's all. Thank you.
Having looked at the presentations being given today, I might be able to unlock a full Architectural Awards conspiracy. I'm onto something, and I will need your help in helping me determine whether or not I may have just unlocked a key to how to win awards in Australia. But I'm just going to keep hush about it, because we'll wait to see what the next presenter's got before I get into that. So next up we have Red Dog Architects, who were shortlisted for 3 awards this year, which is no small thing. And today we'll be hearing from Paul Worrell and Linton Godden to share their work on JD House with us. So if you gents would like to unmute yourselves, you can take it away.
Thank you, Julie. First and foremost, congratulations to the other entrants as well, Nielsen, Jenkins, and Lineberg Wang and also Matt Eagle. Three incredibly impressive projects. So congratulations, and we feel quite honoured to be within such esteemed company. I'm with Linton Godden, and Linton and myself were the project architects, design architects for this particular project. I'm going to share our screen now. And I hope you can see this. I will just change a few slides here, work it out. Slide only, there we go, and then do that. Okay. So this house is located in Capalaba, in suburbia. The majority of houses in this particular suburb were brick veneer, single story, the occasional double-storey brick veneer house, and typically made up of double-car garage, large driveway, and a bit of a backyard. Most of the blocks of land in this particular suburb were around, or this particular precinct were around about that sort of 600 square metre mark. Our client came to us after stalking us for a while on Instagram, and thought that our work was particularly aligned with their thoughts. And basically they came to us and said that they had a budget of about $200,000, and they asked that could we think about how we might extend their house and consider creating a much better living dining space. So quite a typical and conventional type brief to start with. Oops, maybe not. So this is the existing house that you can see. And as you can probably appreciate, it is dominated by double car garage. The entry is off the front street behind that tree there, and the back porch is really just a little lean-to structure, and the little child in the photo is basically the only access they had to that backyard other than via the garage. So the actual existing building probably wasn't particularly memorable, obviously, and didn't have a lot going for it in terms of its ability to perform from a climate perspective or from a maybe a livability perspective, and was pretty much just a spec home, which was fairly typical of most of the houses in the street. So we saw this as a bit of an opportunity to start to interrogate or start to explore how we might rethink the typical typology of a brick veneer house in a sort of spec home suburb, and maybe start to have the client think that there was maybe a different way of approaching the site. Their original ideas when they came to us, as all clients do have some thoughts, was their father had drawn up a plan that involved building a second story over the garage, and basically the second story contained the master bedroom, which meant that the living room would be on the western side and the master bedroom upstairs. Young family, 2 young boys. So we spoke about them about, thinking about now, thinking about 5 years, thinking about 10 years down the track. And one of the key things was that they were a very close family. They spent a lot of time with their children, that they weren't interested in the sort of typical parent-child separation that we get some clients requesting. And they also wanted some way of maybe embracing not only with the backyard. So what we thought about was the opportunity that maybe the building could stretch along the eastern boundary, and by consuming part of the double garage, we could then maybe consider the carport as a bit of an extension of that space and give a little bit more priority back to pedestrian space or occupant space rather than cars. We also felt that maybe we could redefine the entry to the house and move it sort of closer to the centre of the house. And then by pushing the outdoor space to the east, we were able to then define a courtyard and then have northeasterly breezes into the new living area, and also allow for winter sun to penetrate at that lower angle to create some warmth. It meant then that we were actually looking at ways of adding value by doing the extension rather than adding value by reorganising or replanning the existing house, which would have been quite costly. And the western part of the house, which contains the majority of amenities in terms of laundry and bathroom, would therefore be the defensive part of the side of the house, being on the western side. So this is a site plan that sort of has been simplified just to give a bit of an understanding as to the alterations to the house, which was basically the double car garage and part of the existing house, but the majority of the existing house to the west was retained. And then you can start to see that sort of eastern extension, which then stretches from the rear yard through to the front of the site and the carport. And it took a little while to get them over the line on this, but once we were able to engage with them and have them part of the story, they really started to understand the importance of being closer to the ground plane and starting to think about how they might curate the landscape a little bit more than they do. So this is a more detailed plan. As you can sort of tell by the numbering, the entry used to be where the ensuite is now, which is number 10. 11, which is the walk-in robe, is where the kitchen used to be. And number 8, which is the snug, is where the living room used to be. And 9 was a very small bedroom. And the other 2 9s were the other 2 bedrooms. So we started to place a little bit more importance on the living spaces rather than the sleeping spaces. And room 7 was for Josh, who works from home a lot and does a lot of travelling. So he does his work from home. And obviously then the separation of that room from the sleeping and living spaces became fairly key to the scheme as well. Where the kitchen now finishes, the new kitchen, and where the dining room is, that is pretty much the line of where the existing garage went to. And the new living room is obviously on the far eastern side. So that was an extension of the garage form. And then obviously we've got an external courtyard to the street, and we've got an external courtyard that helps to sort of frame that courtyard to the backyard as well. So in section, fairly simple section. The existing house is to the right of this section. The extension is to the left. And part of the narrative was to start to think of maybe using ordinary elements of this type of housing in slightly extraordinary ways. So we started to think about how we might, say, for example, use the brickwork in the extension and use that slightly differently in terms of having it sort of exposed inside to outside, and how it might set up a bit of a dialogue between the old and the new. And also maybe another example is the roof trusses, which were exposed in the extension as well. So this is the extension running from the street through to the rear yard. And you can probably start to see that really we did minimal work to the existing house other than to extend to the east. And that was based around economics and about providing not only an economical solution based on a limited brief or budget, but also based on making sure that we were adding value to the spaces that they were going to spend the majority of their time on, which was both inside and outside. And then that gives you an idea of the exposed trusses in the section there, and that sort of maintaining that ground floor plane and using that as a way of ensuring that there was sort of this seamless connection from inside to outside. And there was very minimal level changes around the extension as well. So just moving through the house, it was quite a modest project for us, and we enjoyed it, and really thoroughly were enthralled at how much the client wanted to be part of that journey. And I suppose the kitchen was a fundamental part, given that that's where they spend a lot of their time. And it was also an opportunity for them to have some visual connection or surveillance back to the street. And it's become quite a powerful element of the new house. And you can start to see that we painted the brickwork of the existing house just to start to connect from new to old, but then behind that window you can see the sort of exposed brickwork. So there were little references back to the existing house and materiality. So this is the carport, very modest, very pared back, very simple structure with gates that would open up to the street into that sort of front courtyard. And what that enabled us to do was not only create some privacy, but it also created security, and then enabled us to also think about how we have the house breathe, which is something the existing house does very little of. The existing house had poor cross ventilation and was very introverted, so there was a real change to the aspirations and of the extension and to the existing house as well with this extension. So as we move inside, this just gives you a look back from pretty much what was the double car garage back towards the existing living room in the background there. And those, you can see those existing windows that was where the photo was taken originally of somebody trying to get out to the backyard. So now this extension moves towards the east. Kitchen, which has a dialogue with the street and also opens up to this new living space, dining space. And the entry sits in behind the sort of that wall there that contains the refrigerator and the wine rack. All the furniture was selected by the client as well, which was great and sort of tied in with the material palette that we were selecting. We were very mindful that they didn't want air conditioning, so the house breathes. It's got good thermal mass with the floor slab. We've used sustainable materials where we can. And obviously, one of the key parts of sustainability for us was to try and retain as much of the existing house as possible. And we also reused elements of the existing house in terms of some structure and also the roof tiles. So then looking back to the street, to the southeast corner, and you can see it sort of opens up into that carport area. So again, as the boys grow older and they're allowed to roam about, that becomes quite an active space, but it also sort of starts to activate the front of the house rather than being quite defensive to the street, which is what a lot of the houses in the street are. And then the kitchen, which has this sort of double aspect in terms of one back to the street, but also one back towards the rear yard. And then you can see the little pop-up in the roof there, which is the extension, which again allows for louvers to be used to allow for good cross ventilation and for hot air to escape. And then this photo is important just to sort of describe where the existing garage was and where the line of the new, or where the line of the extension was. And then we just had a little bit of fun by painting the existing slab and sort of, I suppose, telling a bit of a story about what the existing house was, and then a little bit of playfulness with the round circles that start to echo where the columns land, etc. And then, of course, that's the front courtyard that opens to the street. So looking towards the east, there were some privacy issues that we had to address. So there's some screening as you move to the outside along that eastern wall. But just that datum line there of the brickwork, which again references back to the existing house, but also sets up a nice connection from inside to outside. You can start to see, again, the columns are sort of just galvanised and just painted above that sort of 600 height mark. And then the circle in the concrete paint starts to reflect where that, those columns land. So again, just sort of a little bit of playfulness. And obviously the ceiling raises up to a slightly higher height in this area. The extension was basically made up of metal roof and also exposed roof trusses. So you can see in this image here just some idea about using what I call sort of ordinary elements into a slightly more extraordinary way. And the blades start to help to break up the scale of the space as well. So this is the line looking the other way between, so to the left, you've got the line of the existing house, which was where the existing garage was. And then to the right is this extension or that sort of runs from north to south along the eastern boundary. And just again, just starts to curate or starts to create an edge to a courtyard. To date, the courtyard is really for two young boys to explore and enjoy. And the more sort of informal part of the garden is towards the rear. And obviously, but I think what we like most about the house is the fact that because the house is on the ground, it actually does sort of continue as one big playing area rather than sort of an inside-outside type arrangement. So this is, again, quite a modest extension. The project came in at about $270,000. So, and the client ran the project on their own accord. And we were there just on an as-needs basis. But again, we were particularly pleased to see that the client embraced our detailing and ensured that things were followed through. And then looking back towards the house, you can start to see where the existing house was, which is that sort of white brickwork to the right there. And then just the extension is further to the left. So this is obviously the rear of the house. And I've just included a few photographs. So our client has remained in touch, and we've enjoyed watching how they use and live in the house. The photo down the bottom is obviously the Red Dog team and our client at the entry of the house. But you can just, in all these photos she sends us, they're always showing her kids just finding new spots or new places in which to explore. And I think that's what's really important about this house. It wasn't about expensive finishes. It wasn't about a lot of architectural gymnastics. It was more about creating something that they could live in and creating a house that became memorable for them as their kids grew up. And as I said before, really the garden has just, the extension has just become an extension of the garden for the boys and for the dogs. So we're loving seeing how robust the house is and just how well it is used. And even little things when you see photos of how they've sort of gone to the front of the house and started to engage with the street, which is, it's so non-typical for these streets that have a very sort of, most houses are quite defensive towards that street edge. And of course, the dog knows where the warmest part of the house is. And that's probably a good way to finish on the project. And again, basically, we asked her to, she sent us how much she's enjoying the house, connect back to the street, enjoyed it, and also that, you know, during all seasons, the house is incredibly livable and very sustainable. So that's us from Red Dog Architects. So I shall now stop sharing and I will go back to Julie. But thank you very much and congratulations to all the others, and yeah, best of luck with the State Awards.
Thank you so much, Paul and Lyndon. Lyndon, your thoughts were impressive. Thank you. You're beginning to confirm my theory that photos that include animals get shortlisted for awards. It's a theme I've noticed through all of our webinars, and I may need to quit my job and go and write a PhD on the subliminal influence of animals in photography. But alas, there's no time because we've got one more presenter for you this afternoon. Our final speaker is from Nelson Jenkins, who were also shortlisted for multiple awards this year. So the finalists in this category are really a cut above. Morgan, would you like to walk us through Wooloowin House?
Yes. Lockie can't be here. He's picking up the kids from school. It's a wonderful time. So he's left it with me, big legend that he is. So yeah, we were really stoked to get a commendation in this category. It's always a really good category, and all the other guys in there, Matt Eagle and Red Dog and Michael and Lynn from Weinberg Weighing are all great projects. So we're really happy. This project for us, we called it the Wooloowin House. Wooloowin's a sort of inner north suburb in Brisbane, if you don't know it. This particular site is really elevated and looks west towards the Sanford Valley and the setting sun. On a good day, you get views from the sort of northwest corner of the old deck towards the Glasshouse Mountains to the north. It's actually like really surprisingly elevated. On the south, there's a 3-story 6-pack unit block with an elevated concrete driveway that is hard up against our southern boundary. And the house has a really interesting relationship with the street because it is sunken down from the street. So you sink down into the entry, and then by the time you get to the back of the house, you're really lost touch with the ground plane and you're really elevated, surprisingly elevated. The site fall is about 1 in 6. So this is it from across the split street. So if you arrive by a car or by a footpath, you're not aware of this view in the background. So that sense of surprise and arrival is something that we really wanted to play on, and something that's really important to the scheme. And because of that slope, there's very, very little usable external area, particularly associated when we got there with the existing house with the public and living areas of the house. There was a existing pool at the back of the site that sort of set about this whole renovation. It was severely structurally compromised. On one side it's retaining, on the other side it's very elevated on structural concrete pylons that were cracking. And the clients are a young family, and they really loved the original Queenslander, which is like a really, really beautiful old house, but felt really disconnected from the ground and from the external areas of the site. Yeah. And there was also a really, really sort of regrettable, dingy, dark addition to the understory that they were really keen to get rid of. So our scheme, this is the original concept sketch, but our scheme was about, we wanted to use the new work to privatise the key areas of the house from the neighbours and to play on this sense of surprise on arrival. We've used sort of a choreographed circulation to connect the house into the immediate site and then into a much, much bigger site, much bigger landscape to the context, particularly to the west. And the main scheme, the main sort of crux of what we were trying to do is the sort of creation of 2 new public rooms, one internal via sort of subtraction and one external through careful placement of things. And one of the tricks about the jury not coming to the house this year was us trying to explain what the new work is and what the old work is. So basically everything underneath the black on the left there is all happening within the existing house envelope and on an existing slab up to the existing pool, and everything beyond that is just wrapping the pool with very, very small elements. So this is the sort of the new external public room that we've sort of made by wrapping, but it's the existing pool shell just with rectification works. And then the new internal public room, which is all happening under the old deck roof, which you can see on the left. And we've just sort of carved that out carve that out below and reusing the existing slab. And I think we got rid of 2 columns in the whole project. So we're reusing all the structure from downstairs, all the plumbing points, all the slabs, and everything. This job, it looks really grand in the photographs, but I think the square metre rate is about $2,600 per square metre, and it's working really, really hard on a really challenging site. These are our demolition drawings, and so rather than trying to fight that western sun, we sort of opted for a strategy of more sort of based on subtraction, so to allow a huge overhang to the west and allow opportunities for the family to sort of retreat back further into the plan at the worst times of day. Going back to that last photo, the clients sort of talked a lot on our first visit to the site about that aspect, the western aspect that everyone's so worried about, was actually, it's only really 2 or 3 hours in summer in the worst time of day, and the rest of the time was absolutely magic. So they had retractable blinds on the left there, but we sort of thought that was something to work with, and we sort of started trying to create options for them rather than trying to fight it and just have one primary place. We tried to set up little different areas so they use the plan actively, and they move around the site at different times of the day to sort of move out to the view or retreat back into the shade and the privacy. So that's that sort of idea of the subtraction, going from our original concepts montage to sort of how it is occupied. And then in terms of that addition, in terms of the external room above the pool, around the pool, you can see here the grey area is the original plan of the house and the original envelope of the house. And so really the only new work that we did, the additional work, is we built a new bedroom and took over some of the old deck space for the master bedroom. And then we built this really, a 2-story sort of civic scaled up mesh arbor to the south. Excuse me, and then a timber arbor which frames the view to the west and completes that the courtyard for the pool and creates a north-facing courtyard for the pool. Again, reusing all the bedrooms downstairs that they weren't even really in our original brief, and we've done very minor works to them to sort of make them less dingy and open them up and give them light and ventilation, and then everything else is sort of moving forward through that old, through the existing plan. So that's that additional work. So it's that 2-story mesh screen to the south, to the southern boundary, hard up against that. You can see the elevated concrete driveway in the foreground, building it around existing palm trees that shelters that room from the neighbours. But then from inside that space, these sort of nooks that you can occupy and get reoriented in, so you can hide away from the sun at different times of the day. There was I don't know, we had a real focus on this exact spot that everyone's gathered in this photograph. When we arrived there was literally pieces of plywood tied up in the trees to try and privatise that pool area from the neighbours. And we had an idea that if we can make something out of the most compromised, make something really special out of the most compromised part of the site, that we would be turning what is its sort of weakness into its, now it is literally the most private spot on the whole site. And again, that sort of section idea with the fall of the land, we really wanted to play on that idea of that you arrive, you sink down into the Queenslander, you use the original sort of symmetrical entry, and you get brought forward towards the view, but the void stops you in front of the view, so you can't quite get out to it. And then you get turned around into the staircase and taken back away from the view, and then you get deposited sort of at the bottom into a really sort of classically sort of framed view that just sort of throws you out into this distant landscape to the west. There's also, you know, there's a really beautiful to the northwest. There was a really beautiful paperbark tree that we were really keen on, that sort of short view as well. It wasn't all about the long view. So from that sort of landing of the stair, you have a really you can open all those windows and have sort of a very immediate relationship with that tree as a close thing, and then you come back around it again and you get thrown out into the view. So just, we've sort of arranged the photos in how you would sort of experience the house. So there was the first photo that I showed earlier, but then you arrive and the Queenslander already is sort of sunken into the ground a little bit, the original part of the house. And you're on the ground and you enter into the sort of deep shade. And you sort of move through the old Queenslander, this beautifully detailed old Queenslander. And you're sort of moving past little insertions of architecture to the sides, you know, new sort of rejigged, a couple of rejigged walls and new sort of joinery insertions that just reorganize the spaces through the main part of the house. Then you come down the set of stairs to the landing under that old deck roof. And that sort of landing that has that relationship with the paperbark tree to the north, and that view out to the Glasshouse Mountains and all the operable elements there to the northwest. And you get taken back down, and then you get dropped down into the kitchen with this sort of view out, the long view. The owners are restaurateurs, and they had really specific requirements that they love entertaining. They have really specific requirements around the kitchen areas, and one of their main concerns was having a sort of set of really robust spaces that are sort of materially strong enough and resilient enough that they don't have to care about wet footprints inside, or if someone bomb dives in the pool, or if they literally take, they start coals on the gas plate in here and then take them out to the cooker, which is sort of one of the key elements of the brief initially, the massive grill externally. And you can walk it through the house, and the house is tough enough that it copes with that, you know, and so pulling that material through has allowed us to sort of make what are quite tight little additions, make the whole thing feel really generous and really sort of play with that line of what is internal and what is external throughout the plan. We sort of, from a material sense, we really tried to play with that thing that when you're on the ground, you know it, and when you're elevated, you know it. So by the time you get to the back of this this element, this sort of arbor element, when you get onto the deck, you're about 4.5 or 5 meters out of the ground. And the clients say that they sort of, you know, and we've had quite a few long lunches out there, but it's really interesting how you occupy the different areas during the day. You sort of, they told us stories of their Christmas Day where they had 2 sittings. The first one nestled under the part next to the neighbour's driveway, and then they moved back inside into the void area as the sting comes out of the sun. Then also the deck out on the edge also gives the opportunity that they sort of go out there and have a drink and watch the sunset, and then they tell us stories of how they then turn the chairs around and have sort of a moment of introspection as well. So it's not all about the long view. I think for us, the project is, you know, the hard thing to communicate is the sort of scale of the additions compared to the original house, and the amount that we've tried to reuse of the original fabric for cost reasons and also sort of efficiency reasons, and all the new work, I think, is trying to sort of connect in a much more meaningful way with the site itself, but also give a sense of being in a sort of protected, really grounded space, but sort of connected into a much bigger place than the property boundaries would suggest. I think that's it for us. Thanks, Julie. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks so much for that, Morgan. You can stop sharing your screen with us now. I'm sure your mum, if she were watching, would be super proud.
You're lucky Mum's not in the thing with her.
For a bit of context, Morgan's mum popped in a bit earlier before we started broadcasting, which was lovely. You also had dogs in your photos. I'm really onto something, and I won't keep on about it, but I may have to apply for a Churchill Fellowship to really get into it. I want to thank Morgan and Linton and Paul for being with us today, and Michael for his pre-record. Apologies again for the audio issue. We're already embedding the audio over the top of his presentation, so when you receive the link for the webinar on Monday morning, his presentation will be primo, and this that I'm saying right now will make no sense. Before we wrap up, I was just on the chat with Paul during your presentation, Morgan, and I was just interested. I have a question about whether or not having a pool included in an alts and ads project is sort of viewed by you generally as an obstacle or opportunity, and is it the sort of immovable elephant that you'd prefer not to have, or does it make you have to think any differently about how you approach a project? I'd be interested in your views as well, Paul. And Linton, if you'd like to say something.
It's a, I don't know, it is an immovable elephant, but for us, it's a really interesting project, because I think if you looked at that project in isolation, it's a really, if you look at the model with the neighbours turned off and without having access to the view, it's a really sort of quite strange looking building. But I think it's a really, every piece of the building is reacting to some sort of constraint or opportunity, and sort of quite literally, for instance, it would have never looked like that if the pool hadn't been there, or would have never looked like that if the neighbours weren't there, or it would have looked very different, I think, if we were facing east rather than west. And so I always, I really like doing, Lachlan and I both really like doing alterations and additions, because you really have sort of zero idea what it's going to look like when you go in, and as you work with those constraints. Even the palm trees, they end up with, they end up informing it, and it becomes really specific, I think, and that's the exciting part of our job, I think, is how that thing reveals itself as you understand the house and place and site better.
Yeah, great. What are your thoughts, Paul?
Yeah, look, I think obviously both the other two projects definitely responded particularly well to the swimming pool, and the swimming pool is such a innate part of our lifestyle. So for me, I think if a project comes along and there's the opportunity to have a pool, or to maybe deal with an existing pool, I think it can be particularly challenging, but it can also be particularly rewarding. And I think obviously both projects sort of illustrated that. And I think the other nice thing is it's almost like the pool is in some ways a little bit of a furniture of the landscape. And I think it's just also just a nice way to create an edge. And I think that was really obvious in those projects. I mean, I'm sure our clients would love to put a pool in, and it would have probably meant we might have taken a slightly different response, I think, because obviously when you start to place something of that nature, and like I said, it's almost like a piece of furniture, it starts to change your thinking. And I agree with Morgan on the fact that those elements, in terms of your neighbours, in terms of the landscape, in terms of a swimming pool or whatever, can very much influence and start to drive a project. And pools also have a very strong sort of psychological effect on people as well, just that nature of water, reflection, and all those sort of things. So to be honest, I think the Capalaba house probably would have been a different scheme if our clients wanted to put in you know, a 10 metre, 20 metre pool. And I think we would have maybe thought about the landscape in a slightly different way.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sorry, Julie, as well. I also think that one of the trickiest things is always the pool fencing.
Yes.
In Australia, you know, because it's how you integrate a pool to make it feel like you can focus on the reflections and the cooling sort of thing and enjoy it with it sort of feeling like it's integrated into the house or site or landscape. And there's a, you know, like they're obviously our project and Michael and Lynn's project are using slightly different techniques for how you sort of make the pool fence disappear, but it's a very hard thing to do.
And I was just going to say, Morgan, I think Matt Eagle also had a pool in his scheme as well.
He does at the back, yeah.
And I remember he described it as that sort of invisible edge that they put on it so that they didn't have to have a fence.
Yeah.
So, I think exactly what you're talking about is always part of that challenge.
Yeah. The catalyst for my question was really just the different relationship that's built between, say, how the pool is married to either the existing house or the addition, how they sort of weave together. It was really interesting, very different in yours, Morgan's, and in Michael's as well. Sadly, we have to wrap it up there today. We're about to get cut off. So thank you again for joining us, and apologies for aforementioned audio issues. I hope you can all join us on Monday, the 1st of June at 3 o'clock, where we'll be exploring the shortlisted entries for the Robin Dodds Award for Residential Architecture -houses, parentheses, new. That's a very big category. There are 10 projects being presented on Monday. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you stay safe and have a wonderful weekend. And make sure to tune in to the State Awards, which is streaming at 7 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, the 9th of July. Thanks for joining us, gents. Have a great weekend.
Thanks very much, Julie. Thanks, Paul.
Bye.